In a quiet neighborhood where people mow lawns and wave politely, a woman screamed like it was a war zone. "This girl is a threat to our community. I'm calling the police." That woman was Helen Carter, the kind of Karen who weaponized suburbia and wore her HOA badge like a crown. Emily, my daughter, just stood there, back from college, holding her car keys, doing nothing wrong. Phones came out, curtains twitched. She looked stunned like she'd landed in a different country. But inside our kitchen behind a clean glass window, my wife didn't move. Claire Harper, former federal agent, 17 years counterintelligence, watching calmly, measuring. Helen Carter had no idea what she just started. She picked the wrong person to mess with. Smash that like button if you've ever seen a Karen try to run the whole block. This story, it doesn't end with an apology. Emily came home last week. Her dorm, flooded pipes burst, campus shut down for repairs. She stood in the doorway with a backpack and tired eyes. Still, my little girl, even at 19. Claire hugged her. No questions, just arms. I brought in her suitcase. It smelled like wet concrete and library books. That night, we sat around the dinner table, just the three of us. It had been a while. Emily talked about classes, her roommate's pet lizard, the rain. Claire just listened, soft smile, quiet as always. Most people only know Claire as Emily's mom, but I've seen more. Before this life, before the PTA meetings and grocery runs, Claire was a federal agent, FBI, Civil Crimes Division. She doesn't talk about it much, but she didn't forget how to watch, how to read people, how to wait. And right now, she was watching Helen Carter. The next morning, Helen stood behind her curtains. She had a notebook in one hand and binoculars in the other. Not for birds, not for hobbies, for people. She watched Emily carry groceries from the car. Didn't wave, didn't blink. Claire saw her too briefly, but said nothing. Later, I spotted Helen sitting on her porch writing. One line caught my eye when I walked past transient lifestyle indicators. College returnee. Flagged. That's how she saw my daughter. Not a neighbor, not a person. A threat, a disruption. A variable to control. She didn't confront us, not yet. She preferred to document, to label, to plan. That's how she worked. Quiet first, then loud. Claire sipped her coffee by the window, not saying a word. But I saw the way she tracked Helen's every move. Like she'd seen this pattern before. It came in a plain white envelope taped to our front door. Notice of violation. HOA parking policy. Vehicle parked improperly. Disrupts visual flow of neighborhood. Emily's car was parked in our driveway, not blocking anyone, not on the street, just there. She looked confused. "Is this real?" Claire took the notice, read it once, then placed it flat on the kitchen table. No comment, no anger, just stillness. Then she opened a drawer, pulled out her phone, and took a photo. She filed it into a folder labeled HOA, Evidence. That was Claire's way. She didn't argue. She didn't escalate. She built cases. Emily shrugged it off. But I knew better. This wasn't about a car. It was the first move in a pattern Claire had seen before many times. 2 days later, the Nguyen family got a notice too. This time, it wasn't about a car. It was about curtains. Violation, curtain color, inconsistent with approved HOA palette. Their living room curtains were light blue. Same color they've had for years. Their youngest son was crying outside. Didn't understand why his mom looked so upset. Helen stood at the edge of their yard, arms crossed, expression stiff. She said it out loud for anyone within earshot. "We must protect the aesthetic integrity of our neighborhood." Claire was watering our plants when it happened. She didn't react, but she heard every word. I looked over at her. No expression, no movement. Just the slow grip on the garden hose. That's when I knew this wasn't about rules, it was about control, and Helen was only getting started. That weekend, Claire installed cameras. Front porch, side gate, back fence. Nothing flashy, just enough to watch without being seen. She didn't say why. She didn't need to. Every morning at 6:45, Helen walked the block. Same path, same pace, clipboard in hand. She wore a visor and white sneakers like she was running drills. But this wasn't fitness. It was surveillance. She paused in front of certain houses, especially ours. Sometimes she took photos, sometimes just notes. Claire watched the footage each evening, calm as ever. She didn't call it harassment, not yet, but I could feel the shift. This wasn't just neighborly concern. This was routine, structured, military almost. A self-declared commander patrolling her weaponized suburbia, and Claire. She had seen real dictatorships before. Helen was just dressing hers in khakis and HOA bylaws. I watched Claire at the kitchen table that night, laptop open, papers spread out, maps, photos, printouts from the HOA website. Every violation, every note Helen ever posted, all of it. I leaned against the counter. "What are you planning?" She didn't look up, just typed calm and steady. Then she smirked barely. "Building a case file." I raised an eyebrow. "A case file?" She nodded. Same as before, just smaller territory. I knew what that meant. Claire wasn't reacting. She was investigating. Not like a neighbor, like a fed. Organized, patient, quiet. She wasn't going to argue with Helen. She was going to document her piece by piece. This wasn't the first time Claire had dealt with power misused. But this time, it was on her street. And that made it personal. Claire started comparing emails. She had copies from our mailbox, the Nguyen's, and 2 other families down the block. Same header, same phrasing, same font. Notice of non-compliance. Immediate attention required. Only the names and alleged violations were different. Everything else identical. Some were about noise, some about lawn height. One claimed flag placement inconsistent with HOA decorum. Claire stacked the letters side by side. Lined them up like evidence on a caseboard. "This isn't personal," she said. "It's procedural." I looked closer. Each letter had a contact number, but not the HOA office, a private cell, Helen's number. She wasn't reacting to issues. She was mass-producing warnings. A system. A method. A paper trail designed to push people out. Claire didn't say it, but I saw it in her face. This was no longer just about us. Emily sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest. She watches me when I walk outside. She takes pictures. "I just want to be home. Why won't she leave me alone?" Claire sat beside her. Didn't speak, just wrapped her arms around our daughter. Emily pressed her face into Claire's shoulder, silent, tense. I stood by the doorway, helpless. Claire's hand rested on Emily's back, steady and calm. But her eyes, cold. Focused. No more hesitation. That look I'd seen before years ago on field briefings right before she took down a trafficking ring. Helen Carter hadn't just harassed our family. She made our daughter feel unsafe in her own home. And that crossed a line Claire never allowed. The moment Emily pulled away, Claire stood up. She didn't say it aloud. But I knew the fight just became real. I used to think Helen was just strict, over-involved, a little intense about weeds and fences. But this wasn't about rules anymore. It was about power. She picked targets. Families that didn't push back. Young people. Immigrants. Anyone she could bully without resistance. And she did it with forms, fines, and fear. That morning I looked at Claire across the kitchen. "Helen's not just some difficult neighbor," I said. "She's a neighborhood tyrant. And this block, it's her suburban terror kingdom." Claire didn't disagree. She just clicked through the camera footage, frame by frame. Helen walking past, jotting notes, snapping photos like intel for an operation. She wasn't enforcing peace, she was maintaining control. And if you didn't fall in line, she made sure you paid for it. Until now. Claire let the audios play for me that night. She had walked past the Nguyen house with her phone recording. Helen was standing on their porch, voice low but sharp. "You need to understand." Helen said unsavory college elements are destabilizing the community. I froze. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. This wasn't about curtains or cars. It was about who she thought belonged and who didn't. The Nguyen's. They've lived here longer than we have, Emily, born and raised 2 streets down. But to Helen, they were threats, variables, people who didn't fit her vision of what this neighborhood should look like. Claire paused the recording. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. We both knew this had gone way beyond HOA complaints. This was targeted, deliberate, calculated. Claire found it while tracing email headers. One of Helen's messages wasn't sent from her personal account. It came from a domain she didn't recognize, nsadirect.org. Not the government, not the real NSA. This one stood for Neighborhood Standards Alliance, a private organization, buried behind layers of digital registration. No official website, just a network of forms, HOA templates, and consultants. Claire dug deeper. She found a payment. Helen received a transfer marked as a compliance stipend. Monthly, consistent. It wasn't random harassment, it was structured. She wasn't just acting alone. She was working within a system, a quiet, coordinated group offering tools and money to enforce standards. Claire looked at me and said, "She's not a rogue neighbor. She's an operative." And that changed everything. Claire laid it out for me on the kitchen table. NSA wasn't just a support group, it was a machine. They trained people, mostly older residents, in HOA-controlled neighborhoods. They provided scripts, templates, compliance, escalation strategies. Their mission was buried under nice-sounding words: neighborhood preservation, community optimization. But every case Claire tracked showed a pattern. Target immigrant families. Send multiple notices. Isolate them with fines and fear. Make them leave quietly legally. It was gentrification dressed in regulation. And Helen was one of their most active agents. They called her a community anchor. She had pushed out at least 3 families in the last 2 years. Claire circled the word training on one NSA flyer. Professionalized bullying, she said. That's what this is. And now it had a name, a network, and a trail. Claire made the call. She didn't go through local authorities. She called an old contact, someone still inside the bureau. When she explained what she'd found, NSA, the payments, the targeted removals, there was silence on the other end. Then a voice, "We've been tracking them, quietly, but we didn't have a name for the tactic." Claire replied without hesitation. Weaponized suburbia. That's what this was. Weaponized rules. Weaponized paperwork. Control disguised as order. Her contact told her they had reports from other states. Similar tactics. Same letter formats. Same pressure campaigns. But Claire's files, her recording, screenshots, bank traces were the first concrete link to the organization's funding arm. They asked if she'd be willing to assist in an active investigation. Claire said yes. No pause, no question. She wasn't just protecting our daughter now. She was going to dismantle the system from the inside. Claire went to the next HOA meeting. She wore a plain jacket, no makeup, hair tied back, just another resident. But in her pocket, the mic was recording. One of our front door cameras had been modified for range just in case. Helen was leading the meeting as usual, smiling, calm, running the room like it was a boardroom, not a neighborhood. Then, near the end, someone raised concerns about targeting, about whether the HOA was going too far. Helen didn't flinch. She folded her notes, then said clearly, "Our mission is to cleanse this block, quietly, legally." No one said a word. No one pushed back. Claire sent me the audio that night. I listened twice. Didn't need to hear it again. It wasn't just discrimination. It was policy, delivered with a smile. Claire taped a printed map to the dining room wall. Our neighborhood. Every street. Every home. She marked the houses that had been vacated over the last 2 years. 12 in total, all flagged with red dots. I looked closer. She'd written names beside each one. Last names I recognized families who had just moved away. Then she showed me a spreadsheet. Dates, violations, fines, and resignation letters from those same households. Every single family immigrants. Some Vietnamese, some Guatemalan. One Syrian couple who never even made it 6 months. Claire traced the pattern with her finger. Same script, same pacing, same push. It wasn't anecdotal anymore. It was structured displacement, disguised as routine compliance, a purge wrapped in policy. I stared at the wall. It didn't look like a neighborhood anymore. It looked like a crime scene. Emily sat at the kitchen table, shoulders shaking. She held a letter from the HOA warning of a repeat violation for parking obstruction. A second notice meant it would go on her record. "If they report this to the school," she whispered, "I could lose my scholarship." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to stay composed, but failing. Claire leaned down beside her, steady and calm. She placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. Then softly, but without a hint of doubt, she said, "No one touches the future of a federal agent's daughter." It wasn't just comfort. It was a promise, a line in the sand. I saw Emily's breath steady. Not because she stopped being afraid, but because she knew her mother wasn't just going to defend her. She was going to end this. A manila envelope showed up in our mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a printed notice, stamped with the city seal. Zoning violation. Immediate removal required. It looked official at first glance. Claire took one look and narrowed her eyes. She flipped it over, scanned the barcode, then the seal. "That's not the city's emblem," she muttered. "Wrong font, wrong spacing. It's a fake." She pulled out a real city letter from a drawer, side-by-side comparison. Clear mismatch. Helen hadn't just sent threats. She had escalated to forging government documents. Claire photographed everything, then opened a secure chat with the Bureau. "This crosses the line into federal territory," she said. I looked at the paper again. It was thin, flimsy, fraudulent, but for anyone else it would have worked, and that's exactly what Helen was counting on. Claire got the call the next morning. She stepped outside to take it. 10 minutes later, she came back in with a look I hadn't seen in years. Focused, measured, ready. "The Bureau wants me to be the focal point," she said. I blinked. What does that mean? They're planning a sting, a public arrest, but they need a trigger someone Helen can't resist pushing. "You," I said quietly. Claire nodded. "She's obsessed with order, with proving control. If she thinks she's winning, she'll make her boldest move." I knew what Claire was agreeing to. Pressure, risk, exposure. But this wasn't just an investigation anymore. It was personal. For Emily. For every family driven out. Claire wasn't stepping back. She was stepping into position. And this time she wasn't just observing the game. She was setting the trap. Claire drafted a public post for the neighborhood board. "Due to ongoing tensions, our daughter Emily will be leaving by the end of the week. Thank you for your understanding." Simple. Polite, but deliberate. It spread fast. Comments rolled in, some supportive, most silent. But Claire wasn't watching the replies. She was watching Helen. And Helen moved quickly. That same afternoon, she started knocking on doors. Whispers, phone calls, a sense of urgency. Then came a strange visit, 2 men in pressed khakis and clipboards standing near our driveway pretending to assess boundary compliance. Claire watched from the window, unmoving. "She's accelerating," she said. "She thinks she's winning," I asked quietly. "So what now?" Claire looked at her phone, eyes locked. "Now," she said, "she makes her final move, and we'll be waiting." They came at 9:12 a.m. Helen stood in front, smug as ever, flanked by 2 men in city-style vests and matching clipboards. One of them spoke flatly. "We're here to remove the unauthorized occupant." Emily stood frozen on the porch. She looked back at Claire, eyes wide, terrified. Helen stepped forward, waving a paper with a fake city logo. "This is official. She's been flagged for non-compliance and falsified residency." I stepped outside, fists clenched. But Claire was already there. Calm, composed, phone in hand, recording. No shouting, no panic, Just cold, sharp silence. Helen didn't see the black SUV parked 2 houses down, didn't notice the agents inside watching every move. She thought she had control, but this time she'd crossed the wrong line and the wrong family. Claire stepped forward slow and deliberate. No rush, no panic, just presence. She wore a dark blazer now, subtle but unmistakable FBI badge clipped at the hip. Helen froze. The 2 men turned confused, unsure whether to run or explain. Claire's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You just impersonated federal authority," she said, clear and cold. "On federal camera." Silence fell like a brick wall. Helen's smugness cracked in an instant. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Claire raised her phone, tapped the screen. Agents from the black SUV stepped out at once. Badges, guns, commands. Everything shifted in a heartbeat. Helen wasn't the one in control anymore. She was the target. And Claire, she had just pulled the trigger legally, precisely, finally. The black SUVs pulled up fast. Doors opened. Agents in jackets moved with purpose efficient, silent, unstoppable. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Then the phones came out. One by one, cameras lifted, capturing it all. Helen didn't move. She stood there, shoulders tight, mouth half open, as the agents surrounded her and the 2 imposters. An officer read her rights. She blinked. Didn't speak, just froze. Claire stood to the side, arms crossed. Expression unreadable, controlled. Emily was behind me now, safe, watching. A neighbor whispered, "Is that real?" It was. Everything. Helen built her illusion of control. Her reign of quiet fear collapsed in front of the entire block, and this time everyone saw it. Everyone filmed it. Justice had a face, and today it wore navy blue and federal steel. They cuffed Helen last. She didn't resist, just stared, stunned, like the script she wrote had suddenly been rewritten. As they guided her toward the SUV, Claire stepped forward. Not to gloat, not to shame, to close the loop. She looked Helen dead in the eye. Calm, steady, no anger, just truth. "You weaponized suburbia," Claire said. "I'm going to disarm it." Helen blinked. Nothing more. No apology, no final jab, just silence because she knew she lost. Claire didn't follow her to the car. She didn't need to. Her words echoed louder than sirens. And around us the neighbors had stopped recording. Some nodded, some clapped quietly. No chaos, no celebration. Just a long breath, a release. The rain was over, and Claire had just rewritten what justice could look like on a quiet suburban street. Emily cried. Not from fear, not from pain, but from the weight finally lifting off her chest. Claire pulled her into a hug, tight, silent, grounding. Across the street, the Nguyen kids ran out barefoot, grinning wide. Their mother laughed for the first time in weeks. She waved at us, and Claire nodded back. Then something unexpected happened. Clapping. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. Neighbors, one by one, stepped onto porches applauding not for the fall of Helen, but for the courage it took to stand up. Some people smiled. Some wiped their eyes. One woman whispered, "It's finally over." The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. It was peace. For the first time in a long time, this neighborhood felt like home again. And it started with one family saying enough. 3 months later, the verdict came in. Helen Carter, guilty on multiple federal counts, fraud, civil rights violations, conspiracy to defraud through false representation. 15 years, no parole. She didn't speak at sentencing, didn't look at the families in the courtroom, but her silence didn't matter. Because in the days that followed, the real collapse began. The FBI unsealed the NSA case. Indictments rolled out across 5 states. Neighborhood Standards Alliance was exposed as a coordinated effort to drive out immigrant homeowners under the mask of legal enforcement. Their website went dark. Funding accounts were frozen. Leadership vanished into federal custody. Claire didn't gloat. She just sat on the back porch that night watching Emily study beside the string lights. Justice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It simply worked. Finally, the neighborhood voted. This time, no intimidation, no secret meetings. Just folding chairs in the park, paper ballots, and coffee in thermoses. A new HOA board was elected, diverse, transparent, built from the same people Helen once tried to push out. 1 week later, the Nguyens hosted a block party. Lanterns strung across fences. Kids chalked the sidewalks. Grills smoked on every driveway. Claire made her famous potato salad. Emily helped translate signs for new neighbors. Someone brought a speaker and played old Motown. People actually danced. There were no speeches, no politics, just shared food, shared space, and laughter louder than Helen's silence ever was. I stood beside Claire watching it unfold. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about reclaiming something stolen. A place where people didn't live in fear. A real neighborhood. Finally, Emily sat across from me, hands curled around a mug of tea. The party was winding down outside, laughter still drifting in through the window. She looked up, voice steady. "I've been thinking, I want to study law." Claire turned from the sink, drying her hands slowly. Emily continued. "Not for politics, not for power, but for people like me, people who don't know what to do when someone like Helen comes after them." Claire didn't speak, just nodded, eyes full. I swallowed the lump in my throat. That fear Helen planted in Emily had turned into something else. Conviction. Direction. She wasn't running anymore. She was moving forward with purpose. A new generation. Same fire. And the first step, not escape, but becoming the kind of voice others could count on. 2 months later, it made the news. FBI launches Harper Initiative, a nationwide program to combat HOA abuse. The name felt surreal, but the mission, it was real tangible. Claire had worked closely with the Bureau, helping design training modules for local law enforcement, workshops on civil rights violations, detection of HOA fraud, and how to recognize patterns of intimidation hiding behind paperwork. The initiative didn't just name the problem, it gave people tools to fight back. Our story, what started with one forged notice and a woman watching from behind a kitchen window, had become part of something bigger, something federal, structural. The headlines called it a win. We called it closure. And for the families still trapped in the places like ours once was, it was a flashlight in the dark. Claire didn't just expose corruption, she changed the rules. Dinner was simple that night, just us, no tension, no quiet fear humming beneath the surface. Emily passed the salad. Claire poured iced tea. The back door was open and the breeze felt like peace. I looked around the table. Everything felt whole. Then I said it almost without thinking, but it had waited years to be said. Karen thought this was her kingdom, but we're the ones who live here. We always were, Claire smiled. Emily laughed softly. No crowns, no fear, just family. This wasn't just our win, it was a reminder to anyone listening that silence doesn't keep you safe. Standing up does. Comment below if you've ever dealt with HOA abuse. Say it loud. Me too. Let's bring the shadows into the light. Smash that like button if you believe no neighborhood should be ruled by fear. We took ours back. Now it's your turn.